Greece holds secrets in its mountains, underground passages, and sunken cities that are rarely written about in textbooks. Here, every stone can be part of a forgotten legend, and the silence a hint of long erased events. On this journey, we will uncover, step by step, 20 little-known mysteries that change our understanding of its past. Skull of Petralona. In northern Greece, near the village of Petralona, there's a cave that looks perfectly ordinary from the outside. Rocks, bushes, a path used by shepherds. But inside this hill, something was once discovered that still haunts scientists and mystery lovers. Deep within the rock, as if in a stone cradle, lay a skull that refused to fit into the conventional picture of human origins. You can picture the scene. A researcher shines a flashlight on the walls, revealing traces of ancient deposits. Suddenly, the outline of a head appears in the limestone. It's not just a bone lying on the ground, but a skull molded into the rock, as if it were deliberately placed there. The first impression itself creates a sense not of natural chance, but of strange design, as if someone wanted to leave a message across the depths of time. When the skull was freed from the stone, it became clear that it resembled neither the remains of a modern human nor those of a more primitive species of ancient humans. The features seemed mixed. The forehead was low, but not excessively so. The brow ridges were prominent, but not as strong as those of more primitive species. The face was neither entirely modern nor entirely ancient. This in-between state sparked debate that continues to this day. Some researchers claim this is an extremely ancient human specimen, living hundreds of thousands of years ago. Others believe it's younger. But the main problem isn't even the numbers. The very existence of such a skull in this location disrupts the conventional human migration patterns previously used by scientists. It appears that these mountains may have been inhabited by a type of human long overlooked in evolutionary models. There are even more daring theories. Some researchers who straddle the line between scientific and alternative approaches insist that the skull points to a very ancient civilization, one that existed long before conventional history. You hear their logic. If the anatomy doesn't fit into conventional categories, if the age is debatable, then you're looking at traces of an unknown chapter of the past. Mainstream science is reluctant to embrace such ideas, but they persist because the mystery remains unsolved. The Petralona cave adds another layer of mysticism. Traces of ancient fire and animal bones were found inside, indicating that ancient people truly used this place. Imagine night, the faint glow of a fire, a wind blowing outside the cave walls, and hidden deep within the passages is the very area where the unusual skull will later be found. This begs the question, who was this person? A hunter, a shaman, an exile, or someone who occupied a special place in their community? The skull's position in the stone itself creates a separate mystery. Some believe it was deposited there naturally and was simply covered over time by sediment. Others, more daring, suggest the body was deliberately placed in the depression and time transformed the burial into a solid stone block. This would make the cave not only a campsite, but also a primitive shrine or a special burial site. Over time, numerous legends have grown up around the discovery. Some stories claim that after the cave's discovery, locals began experiencing an increase in strange dreams in the area, as if someone from the depths of time were trying to tell them something. Other versions claim the skull belonged to a being not native to these parts, which is why its appearance seems so controversial and unusual. There's no scientific evidence for this, but that's not necessary for the air of mystery. Today, when you look at photographs of this skull, it seems like an ordinary object in a museum display case. But if you mentally return it to its stone shell, to the darkness of the cave where it lain for thousands of years, the feeling changes. Before you is no longer just a bone, but a silent witness to an era about which too little is known. And while scientists debate its exact age and origin, Petralona remains a place where 50 steps into the rock separate familiar history from its possible hidden version. The city of Halik, On the coast of the Gulf of Corinth, there once stood the prosperous city of Helic. Its temples, artisan quarters, and harbors were considered the pride of the local lands. But one night it vanished so suddenly that people for a long time could not believe it had happened. The story of the city swallowed by water is usually briefly heard, but the real picture is far deeper and darker than it first appears. You imagine a warm evening with residents preparing for bed. Nothing foreshadows trouble. But then the ground begins to shake. At first gently, as if someone were pushing against the walls of the houses. Then more violently. People run out into the streets, and a strange, dull noise rises over the sea. It's not the wind or the waves. It's a growing rumble, as if coming from the depths. Local chronicles describe animals in the harbor becoming restless before the destruction, but no one paid much attention to it. The main blow came suddenly. The earth split, and part of the city sank beneath it, as if falling into a giant stone maw. Then a huge wave crashed onto the remaining blocks. It didn't just flood the streets, it tore trees out by the roots, demolished buildings, and in a matter of moments turned the city into an underwater desert. People who were there recalled the sky being low and heavy, as if it didn't want to bear witness to what was happening. For decades after the Helic's sinking, no one could pinpoint its location. Sailors claimed to sometimes see the outlines of columns through the clear water. They claimed to see streets beneath the surface, and even reported hearing a dull ringing sound from the bottom on quiet nights, like stones colliding. These stories were passed down as legend, but for a long time, no proof was found. Interestingly, Helike's disappearance has given rise to many theories. Some believe the city fell due to a natural disaster. Others claim the catastrophe was no accident, but rather a punishment for the greed and arrogance of the locals. There was a story in which the locals allegedly refused hospitality to a traveler, and the disaster descended on the city in response. Although such tales appear to be moral parables, they capture the main point. The destruction was so sudden that people needed some kind of explanation. But the most intriguing theory stems from another, much more ancient legend. Some scholars and researchers of mysteries have suggested that Helike's disappearance may have served as the prototype for other ancient stories of cities swallowed by the sea. They believe the memory of sudden catastrophes in these places inspired tales of mysterious civilizations that vanished without a trace. Although there is no direct evidence for this, the idea itself creates a unique sense of a profound echo across the centuries. When modern archaeologists began searching for Helic, they discovered that the city had been flooded twice over the years, first by the sea and then by river silt. This explains why the site remained elusive for so long. When researchers finally found the remains of streets, it became clear how rapid the destruction had been. Buildings lay as if they had been washed away in a single blow, and objects that people clearly hadn't had time to take were found near the walls. Particularly notable are the finds that indicate that life in the city was orderly and peaceful. Jewelry, dishes, and craft tools were found among the ruins. Everything suggests that the residents weren't expecting disaster. Imagine a street where lamps are still burning, but the first tremors are already running through the surrounding area. A moment later, this street disappears beneath a thick layer of water. And when the debris is later found, it's as if the breath of that night has frozen in it. Helike is now being studied in far greater detail than before. But even with excavations and maps, the feeling remains that this place conceals more than it reveals. The destruction was too swift, too complete, and too much like a deliberate erasure. It's as if you're looking at a ghost town that didn't simply collapse, but vanished in a scenario reminiscent of an ancient rite of destruction, where the elements acted as the final judgment. And the more they try to reconstruct the events of that night, the more they sense a strange silence that envelops Helike's story, as if nature itself doesn't want to fully reveal its secret. Fires of Tagatos. Mount Tagatos rises in the southern Peloponnese. Its peaks are visible from afar, But it's at night that this range becomes one of the most mysterious places in Greece. For centuries, locals have told tales of strange lights that flare up on the slopes and instantly disappear, as if someone were walking with a torch along the steep paths. Standing at the foot of the mountains, you realize that the mountains seem to have a hidden life of their own. These lights can only be seen on clear nights. They appear sometimes high among the rocks, sometimes almost at the tree line. The light is always moving, changing direction, as if ascending or descending. But the strangest thing is that no traveler has ever found traces of people where the lights were observed. Taygetos is too inaccessible for anyone to silently walk along its slopes at night and disappear without a trace. This behavior of the light creates the feeling of deliberate movement. One explanation involves rare natural phenomena. Some speculate that these are discharges caused by the peculiarities of the rock. But if that were the case, the lights would flash randomly. The reality is different. The light behaves as if following the path of an invisible traveler. Sometimes it seems as if several dots are moving simultaneously, as if a whole group were carrying torches along a forgotten mountain path. You begin to understand why the locals take these stories so seriously. There's a theory that the lights are connected to ancient rituals. Taygetos was a sacred site for many peoples. Initiation rituals were held here, and some legends spoke of mysterious mountain guardians who emerged at night to guard the land's borders. When locals see the lights, they often recall these ancient tales, not as a myth, but as a warning that the mountain harbors something that dislikes intruders. Sometimes lights appear where there are no paths. The light flashes directly over the abyss, lingers for a few seconds, and then fades as if someone is standing in midair. This is particularly frightening to observers. In such moments, people find no rational explanation. Taygetos becomes a place where the laws of the familiar world seem to weaken, and the mountain itself becomes an arena for an ancient power that cannot be fully seen. There are also more mundane observations. Hunters sometimes report that the lights appear in pairs, as if two lights were moving side by side. They move in sync, which is almost impossible for random natural discharges. And sometimes the lights begin to climb up the slope in slow jerks, as if someone were climbing a rocky ledge. You see this image and understand why stories of night watchmen endure. The lights of Taygetos don't always appear, but when they do, a strange silence fills the air. The birds fall silent, the wind seems to die down. This creates the feeling that the mountain is watching you. People who have seen the lights often say they experienced an inexplicable feeling, not fear, but as if they were being called to leave. Such sensations reflect the ancient respect for a place that has for centuries been considered a threshold between the human and spiritual worlds. Even modern researchers admit that the phenomenon remains unsolved. No instruments detect any clear light sources, and no expedition has been able to trace the lights closely enough. They always disappear when anyone tries to get close, as if they know they're being observed. This elusive nature makes Taygetos the perfect haven for a mystery that refuses to be explained. Standing at the foot of the mountain, watching the brief light flicker across the slopes, you sense that such a place cannot be ordinary. It seems to preserve the memory of a time when mountains were considered living beings. And the lights that race along the slopes become a reminder that there are still places in the world where the ancient and incomprehensible still breathes right before you, yet remains out of reach. The Labyrinth of Massara. In the Massara Valley of Crete, there's a place locals simply call the Cave. But this modest name conceals a vast underground complex where you can navigate dozens of turns and still not know where you are. It's a labyrinth rarely mentioned to tourists. It's not adorned with legends of beasts and heroes, yet it's considered one of the most intricate and ancient structures on the island. You step inside and immediately sense that the space here behaves strangely. The walls seem identical to one another, and the passages create the impression that the place was built not for convenience, but for a purpose that is impossible to immediately discern. The silence is oppressive. Every sound of footsteps echoes and vanishes as if absorbed by something invisible. Even experienced explorers feel a slight tension here, as if the labyrinth is watching every move. The main mystery of Masara is the complex's origin. Local stories claim it was carved by hand. But upon reflection, a question arises. Why would ancient people create so many long, narrow passages that rarely lead to large halls? In some corridors, you can walk for several minutes and still end up at a dead end or a fork, where each turn leads to a new repetition of the same form. Such a structure resembles neither a shelter nor a warehouse, but a place where the traveler is deliberately confused. Some researchers suggest the labyrinth was used for rituals. Imagine ancient processions walking in the dark, illuminated only by the dim light of torches. They circle, repeating the same path until they reach the center, perhaps a hall that no longer exists or has yet to be found. Such a structure could have created a state of particular tension in which a person loses their sense of time and direction, becoming more sensitive to the events around them. Another theory suggests that the labyrinth was built gradually over the course of many generations. Each new section was constructed without a coherent plan, and over time the underground network devolved into a chaotic chaos of passages. However, this theory poorly explains the striking symmetry of some parts. Deep within the complex, there are sections where the walls form perfect angles, and the corridors seem to mirror each other. This creates the impression of a deliberate geometric pattern rather than a haphazard construction. The most intriguing part concerns the strange sounds. People who have descended deeper report sometimes hearing a distant echo that doesn't resemble their footsteps. It seems to come from areas where no one goes, or from levels not on the map. These sounds resemble soft thumps, as if someone far below is tapping on stone. Naturally, there's no scientific explanation for this, but when you remain in the darkness of one of the corridors, you hear a slight tremor in the air and realize that the sound really isn't like a normal echo. A sense of an alien presence appears within. There's another curious detail. In some rooms of the labyrinth, strange air movements have been observed. The air doesn't move as it should in a confined space. Drafts appear where there are no visible openings and disappear as suddenly as they appear. This suggests that the underground system may be much more extensive than currently known, and that new levels may be hidden behind the sealed passages. Sometimes researchers stumble upon old traces of human habitation in these tunnels. The walls contain recesses and depressions resembling niches, but their purpose is unclear. They are too small for storage and too numerous to be random decoration. Some believe they were used to hold lamps illuminating the way. Others are convinced they are part of a symbolic system that no one knows about today. Standing at the exit and peering deeper, the labyrinth seems to be biding its time. The walls seem to remember the footsteps of those who walked them centuries ago. And although it is open to exploration, the sense of mystery lingers. Masara remains a place where human attempts to explain the ancient collide with something deeper and more stubborn. Here, every turn can lead to something that forces us to reconsider our understanding of Crete's past, as if the memory of these stones has a hidden life of its own. Cups of Epirus. High in the mountains of Epirus, where the slopes are covered with dense forests and rare trails wind between rocky ledges, strange stone formations are encountered. They are called cups. These are rounded depressions in monolithic boulders, smooth inside, as if polished by human hand. They appear in groups, sometimes dozens at a time, and create a sense of ancient design that is impossible to decipher at first glance. When you approach one of these bowls, you're struck by its perfect shape. The surrounding stone is uneven, jagged, and covered in the marks of time, but the bowl itself seems to have been carved by a skilled craftsman. Its walls are smooth, and the bottom is rounded. At times, it seems as if you're looking not at a natural formation, but at part of a very old tool or vessel that no one was able to carry away, and it remains lying right there on the mountainside. Some believe the bowls may have been part of an ancient ritual. In Epirus, there were tribes who placed great importance on mountain peaks and considered them places of power. Imagine centuries ago, people climbing to the summit, carrying water or herbs, and then slowly pouring the contents into these stone bowls, watching the liquid disappear into the depths of the stone. This image creates a connection between man and nature that is difficult to imagine today. But there's a detail that deepens the mystery. Many of the bowls are connected by thin grooves. They run along the stone surface, forming a network reminiscent of an ancient waterway. Sometimes the grooves are so smooth that they appear to have been carved by man rather than created by nature. If we imagine water flowing through them, a whole system emerges, in which each bowl could have performed its own function, like an unknown mechanism. Some researchers suggest that such formations may have been connected to celestial observation. Epirus is a region with clear nights, where the starry sky appears especially bright. If you pour water into a bowl, it becomes a reflective surface, and the stars change shape as it curves. Perhaps the ancients used this as a way to study celestial movements. But why, then, are the bowls of different sizes and arranged so haphazardly? There are even more daring theories. Some residents of nearby villages say the bowls appear where the earth seems to be permeated with something unusual. They say that at night, near these stones, the air becomes denser and sounds are muffled, as if the space around them changes its properties. These stories have no scientific confirmation, but they create a unique image of a place where nature behaves differently. Interestingly, traces of old fire pits were found near some of the bowls. This suggests that people actually came here and spent time near the stones. Perhaps they waited for a certain moment of the night or year when the bowl began to perform its hidden function. Perhaps they watched the play of light on the water or listened to sounds that changed due to the shape of the stone surface. There are theories that the bowls may have been used as a kind of sound instrument. Striking a stone near a hollow produces a strange, hollow sound that can be heard from a distance. Groups of bowls can create resonance, causing the entire massif to vibrate quietly and subtly. This resembles ancient mountain music, where the stones become part of a natural instrument once used by local tribes. The main mystery is that such bowls are too numerous to be considered a coincidence. They are found in hard-to-reach places, where no one would bother to hoist heavy tools to create meaningless indentations. Their appearance suggests that there was once a tradition here that was important to the locals. And this tradition disappeared, leaving only silent stones scattered among the slopes. Standing next to one of the bowls and running your hand along its smooth walls, you get the feeling that this stone still remembers someone's touch. Centuries have passed, but the shape remains. The wind blows over the mountain, leaves rustle in the shade of the trees, and the bowl lies before you, completely motionless, as if waiting for someone to remember its true purpose. Lights of Trichonida. Lake Trichonida, surrounded by the hills and low mountains of western Greece, appears calm and even a little sleepy. Its water is dark and thick, reflecting the sky without the slightest distortion. But at night, a phenomenon occurs here that compels one to peer into the surface every time one passes by. Lights, like tiny flames, flicker on the water, moving as if drawn from the depths. When you first see this light, it seems like a boat with a lantern, but after a few seconds you realize there's too much light, moving silently and leaving no trace on the water. Sometimes the lights appear in groups, merging and separating as if communicating with each other through invisible signals. Their behavior resembles a living entity, rising to the surface only for brief moments, only to disappear again. Locals say the lights are especially active on warm summer nights when the air is still. At such moments, the lake appears like a mirror, and the lights are tiny flashes emerging from the silence. Watching them is unsettling. The light isn't reflected on the water. It seems to hang above the surface, defying normal laws. This sensation creates the image of a phenomenon that lives by its own rules. There's a theory that a rare biological luminescence could be the cause. But the lake is too deep, and most organisms capable of producing light live in other climates. Furthermore, the behavior of the lights is too complex. They don't flicker in one place, but move, sometimes changing direction abruptly. This is unlike the natural glow of algae, which usually spreads in broad patches. Here, the light is pinpointed, focused, as if controlled. Some say the lights appear where ancient settlements once stood, now hidden underwater. These stories suggest that the memory of the past never completely fades. The lights rise to the surface, seeming to recreate the sites where houses, roads, and shrines once stood. This version seems more like a legend, but it surprisingly accurately conveys the feeling of gazing at a lake at night. Sometimes the lights can be seen directly above the deep part of Trichonida. They don't simply hang in the air, but slowly rise, as if breaking through the water. Such moments give observers the feeling that the lake is breathing. You stand on the shore, and it seems as if there's movement below, unseen but felt on your skin. The lights become the only hint of the hidden life of the depths. There are stories from fishermen who claim to have seen lights very close by. They describe them as a sphere, slightly larger than the palm of a hand, moving silently above the water. As the boat drew closer, the light dissolved, as if drawn into the lake's surface itself. Such stories are difficult to verify, but they are repeated across generations, making them not just part of folklore, but an observation that is hard to ignore. What seems especially strange is that the Trichonida lights don't have a consistent location. They flash in different spots, appearing for a second, and then disappearing, creating a sense of elusive regularity. It's as if there's a rhythm no one has yet been able to decipher. Some claim that if you stare at the lake for long enough, you can notice a subtle pattern in their movement, reminiscent of pulsation or breathing. Scientists studying the lake attempted to record these lights, but their equipment rarely yielded clear results. Cameras captured faint glimmers that could be explained by reflections, but living witnesses insist there were no reflections. This creates a gap between human experience and the cold data of the instruments. And it is precisely in this gap that a sense of mystery arises, one that cannot be fully explained. Standing on the shore of Lake Trichonida and watching a tiny point of light suddenly flare above the dark water, a strange feeling fills you, as if the lake is trying to say something beyond words. These lights remind you that even the most familiar landscapes conceal more than we see during the day. And when night falls on Lake Trichonida, its surface becomes a boundary between what is known and what still defies explanation. Sphere of Dodona. In the mountains of Epirus, amid dense forests and rocky outcrops, lie the ruins of the sanctuary of Dodona. People from all over Greece once gathered here to hear answers from the powers they believed resided in the wind, leaves, and stone. But beyond the well-known rituals associated with the ancient oaks, there is a far more mysterious element to this place. It is called the Sphere of Dodona, not a physical object, but a phenomenon that has confounded those who came here for centuries in search of truth. When you first find yourself among these stones, you're struck by the unusual silence. The wind here seems to have a different sound, soft, drawn out, as if carrying a hidden rhythm. And it's in this silence that the sense of a strange force dawns. People who spent long periods in Dodona reported feeling an invisible circle around them, as if they were standing in the center of a large dome, created not by hands, but by something more ancient and subtle. The Sphere of Dodona is described as a zone where sounds and sensations change. You stand among the stones and suddenly realize you can hear your own breathing more clearly than usual. Footsteps seem muffled, and the sound of the wind seems to pass around without touching the center. This creates the impression that space is slightly curved, not so much that the eye notices, but so that the skin feels it. This subtle change has always accompanied a stay in the sanctuary, and it has become part of the legends passed down from generation to to generation. Some believe that a domed hall actually existed here in ancient times, but even if it did, it doesn't explain why the sensation of a sphere persists, even though the walls disappeared centuries ago. If a place loses its shape but retains its effect, then the force creating the sensation isn't connected to the architecture. It lies within the earth itself. Some stories say that layers of stone are hidden beneath the ruins, amplifying sounds and creating unique vibrations. But even this theory doesn't explain all the strange occurrences. The most famous of these is the whisper. People claim to have heard muffled sounds at certain moments, unlike either the wind or animals. These sounds resembled words, but were incomprehensible. You think someone is speaking, but the meaning is lost, as if the words were passing through water. This phenomenon was so frequent that it became part of legend. And although today it is attributed to the wind, those who were in Dodona at night claim to have heard something quite different. There are also more specific observations. In the center of the ruined sanctuary, there's a patch of land where plants grow differently. The grass here is taller, the leaves are thicker, and the color changes more quickly than in the surrounding areas. Some believe this is due to the soil's properties, but locals are convinced that the earth here absorbs the sounds, rituals, and emotions of the people who have come here for centuries. They say the sphere of Dodona is a trace of human prayers accumulated over many centuries. If you spend a long time in this zone, you feel as if time slows down. Not so much that it can be measured, but enough to sense a change in rhythm. In such places, a person feels their thoughts louder and their feelings become more intense. Therefore, the sanctuary was considered not just a place of divination, but a space where a person could hear themselves. Perhaps this is the secret. It wasn't external forces that spoke to people, but rather people themselves who heard what is usually hidden deep within. But there are also more mystical tales. Some travelers claim to feel a slight pressure on their chests in the center of the ruins, as if the air were becoming denser. This sensation came quickly and disappeared just as suddenly. It wasn't painful, but it evoked a sense of respect, as if the place were warning you of the boundary between the ordinary world and a zone where different laws apply. It's difficult to say whether this is a peculiarity of the wind, the properties of the stone, or something more subtle, but the sensation is too often described in the same way. Sometimes people reported feeling a quiet vibration beneath their feet while standing in the center of Dodona. Not an earthquake, but a gentle, barely perceptible tremor that repeated at irregular intervals. Similar vibrations can be felt in ancient sites where the stones create special acoustic conditions. But here, the vibration doesn't always occur. It emerges unexpectedly, as if the place itself decides when to make its presence known. This makes the sphere of Dodona resemble a living being, observing, listening, and reacting to human presence. Legends say that in ancient times, the priests of Dodona could sense when the sphere was active. They determined this not by sound or light, but by sensation. It was believed that at such moments, a person could ask a question and receive an answer in the form of a sign. Sometimes the answer was a gust of wind, sometimes a gentle crackle in the leaves of the oak tree standing in the center of the sanctuary. The priests interpreted these signals, but they understood them not with their ears, but with an inner sense that cannot be described in words. Perhaps it is precisely this sensitivity that we have lost over time. Today, when you visit Dodona, the sanctuary looks like ordinary ruins. The stones lie as if someone carefully dismantled them. But if you pause in silence, you can feel the space begin to press gently. The air becomes denser, and the leaves on the trees rustle differently. It's as if you find yourself at the center of an invisible circle where not everyone enters, but only those who truly listen. The sphere of Dodona remains a mystery, impossible to measure with instruments. It exists not in the stones, nor in the air, nor in the earth, but in a combination of all of these. It is the memory of a place, the echo of ancient voices, and an invisible structure that continues to function even if no one knows its true purpose. Standing here, you sense that the ancients were closer to understanding this phenomenon than we are. And this is precisely what makes Dodona not just a ruin, but a place where the boundaries between past and present become especially thin. Molosial's failure. Deep in Thessaly, among the gentle hills and narrow paths, there's a place the locals avoid even during the day. It's called the Molosiala Gap. On a map, it looks like an ordinary depression, but as you get closer, you realize a strange force is at work here. The air grows colder and sounds seem muffled. This sensation comes on suddenly, as if you've crossed an invisible boundary. The sinkhole is a wide, rocky crater descending in steps of natural ledges. A dark crack gapes in the center. Locals insist it goes deeper than it appears. Standing at the edge, the darkness of the bottom seems not simply an absence of light, but an active space that seems to absorb the gaze. Even on a sunny day, the center of the sinkhole remains a dense, almost solid spot. Stories about this place go back far into the past. Some old-timers say the sinkhole appeared suddenly. According to their stories, several centuries ago the ground in this area trembled, and an entire section of the slope sank underground. But the strange thing isn't the collapse itself, but rather the changes people subsequently began to notice. Plants in nearby areas began to grow differently. Their leaves lengthened, and their color became darker. Animals wandering into the area became restless, and many avoided the area entirely. The behavior of the sound is particularly intriguing. If you shout near the chasm, the echo responds strangely. It seems not to return directly, but rather to move in a circle, gently shifting. Sometimes the echo arrives with a slight delay, as if passing through several hidden barriers. This impression creates the illusion that there are voids underground, complex and multi-layered, as if a whole network of voids, unexplored and dangerous, is hidden there. Some speculate that the hole may be the entrance to an old cave system, once inhabited by tribes that left traces of their culture. However, no objects have been found to confirm this. Other researchers claim the crack's shape is too smooth to be purely natural. In some sections of the walls, nearly straight lines are visible, as if they had once been carved. But there's no explanation. Who would carve passages in such inaccessible places, and why? Old stories often mention a sound resembling a dull throb. People claimed that at night a slow heartbeat, like a throb, could be heard coming from the center of the sinkhole. It repeated at regular intervals, and sometimes intensified when the moon rose in the sky. Such stories are now considered mythical, but those who spent the night nearby did indeed notice strange vibrations in the ground. They described it as a gentle pulsing movement, as if the earth were sending an invisible signal. In some places, light streaks are visible on the walls of the sinkhole. At certain angles, they form a pattern resembling a tall silhouette or an elongated figure. Local residents have long interpreted this as a sign from the guardian of the sinkhole, a spirit that guards the entrance to the underworld. Legends say this guardian keeps out those with ill intentions and can sometimes warn someone if they stray too far. Interestingly, birds rarely appear above the sinkhole. They fly past as if avoiding its edges. In good weather, dozens of birds fly over the valley, but as soon as they approach the sinkhole, they abruptly change direction. This behavior is difficult to explain. Perhaps it is related to air currents rising from the depths. Inside the sinkhole, the air moves differently. Weak gusts of wind arise suddenly, as if generated not by the weather, but by the landscape itself. The place takes on a particularly tense atmosphere at dusk. The light slowly fades, and the chasm seems to widen. The shadows on the walls become longer, and the crack in the center seems to breathe. People observing the chasm in the evening sometimes describe strange reflections of light appearing deep below. They don't resemble a reflection of the sun or fire. They are soft, diffused, as if emanating from within the stone. One of the most frightening elements concerns animal disappearances. Over the past decade, several shepherds have reported that their goats or dogs would approach the edge of the sinkhole and never return. When people tried to descend to see what had happened, they found only footprints in the dust that ended at the edge of the crack. The animals' bodies were never found. This led to the belief that the sinkhole had hidden depths, inaccessible by normal means. There are also strange tales of people spending nights here. Some claim to hear a soft whisper. It was so faint that it seemed like a movement of air. But if you listened long enough, the whisper would transform into a series of sounds resembling words. The meaning couldn't be discerned, but the sound clearly emanated from the crack itself. Such stories led people to regard the chasm with even greater reverence and avoid it at night. Today, the sinkhole looks like an ordinary geological anomaly. But when you stand nearby, you realize something else is at work. The place seems to remember events that were never recorded. It preserves the underground breath of the mountains, traces of ancient legends, and an unusual sense of presence. The Milosiala Cave remains one of those corners of Greece where nature and mystery merge, creating an atmosphere that defies simple explanation and compels you to return in your thoughts even after you've left its edge. Walls of Tiryns. On the Argolid Plain, amidst hills and ancient olive groves, rises Tiryns, a place that looks as if it were built by beings possessing superhuman strength. Enormous stone blocks lie on top of one another with such precision and stability that it's hard to imagine hands capable of lifting them to the height of a human. These walls are called Cyclopean, not because of their beauty, but because of their scale, which evokes both respect and anxiety. Tiryns appears to be an ordinary fortress only from a distance. But as you approach, your gaze is drawn to the gigantic boulders, each weighing so much that even modern cranes would struggle to lift them. The stones are arranged as if someone carefully placed toy blocks rather than moving multi-ton chunks of rock. And this is precisely what creates an air of mystery that has persisted here for centuries. The walls stretch around the perimeter of the hill, forming a powerful ring. In some places, they are so thick that a full-fledged corridor could be built inside. These narrow passages, called galleries, extend deep into the wall, creating the feeling that you are not just looking at a defensive structure, but at an entire system designed according to a complex and thoughtful plan. As you walk along these stone corridors, time seems to move differently inside. The main mystery of Tiryns lies in the construction methods themselves. People often say that ancient craftsmen could have lifted the stones using techniques we've simply forgotten. But when you imagine the actual scale of the work, doubt arises. How did they even move such blocks? Even with wooden rollers, ropes, and levers, human strength is insufficient to lift and stack the stones several meters high. It's as if the builders possessed knowledge that hasn't been preserved in written sources. Some researchers suggest that the walls were built gradually, taking advantage of natural slopes and protrusions. However, this theory poorly explains the perfectly fitted sections where the stones lie so tightly, as if smoothed with a uniform tool. In some places, the surface lines on the stones match so precisely that you can run your hand between them without catching a single uneven surface. This quality is difficult to replicate even today without specialized tools. The structure of the passages within the wall deserves special attention. The galleries consist of narrow passages, vaulted ceilings, and small niches spaced at regular intervals. These elements appear to be part of a unified system where each stone is placed deliberately. They resemble the internal mechanisms of a vast structure. Some believe the galleries may have been used as hidden passageways for warriors, but even if this were true, why did the builders devote so much attention to form and perfect symmetry? There's a theory that Tiryns wasn't just a fortress, but a place where rituals were performed. This theory is supported by the unique acoustics of its interior. If you speak a word inside one of the galleries, the sound doesn't fade immediately, but seems to move along the wall, repeating several times. This sensation evokes a strange feeling, as if the stone itself were responding to you, filtering the sound through its layers. Perhaps the people who built Tirans knew how to use stone masses to create special acoustic effects. Another mystery concerns the unusual energy of the site. People who have spent long periods near the walls have described a feeling of slight pressure in the air. This pressure is unrelated to fatigue or the weather. The pressure appears suddenly when approaching certain sections of the wall and disappears after a few steps. Some researchers believe this is due to magnetic anomalies in the rock. However, such areas do not occur throughout the wall, but only in places where the blocks are especially densely packed, as if the builders knew how the shape influences the hidden forces of the stone. If you climb to the upper level of Tirans, you'll notice that the walls form not just a fortification, but a complex structure with terraces and platforms. Some of these appear to be observation points, others like meeting places. However, there are no traces of luxurious buildings or rich decorations. The builders focused their attention entirely on the walls. This suggests that the fortress itself was more important than the buildings within it, as if it served a function beyond simple defense. What's also interesting is that Tirans is located on a hill overlooking a vast portion of the valley. This position made the fortress an important observation point, but if observation had been the sole purpose, the walls wouldn't have required such incredible strength. It's as if the builders anticipated a threat that didn't emanate from humans, but rather something massive and destructive. Perhaps they believed that only such walls could withstand a force beyond mere resistance. Some believe Tirans was built not in a single period, but over several eras. However, even if this is the case, the question arises: why was the architectural style so consistent? Different generations typically introduce their own changes, but at Tirans, the structure of the walls appears to be a single, unified design. This creates the impression that the builders followed a strict tradition or passed on knowledge from master to apprentice without distortion. Such precision is unusual for very ancient buildings where styles often blend. There are marks on the stones that resemble depressions or channels. Some believe these marks were left by tools used to transport the boulders. However, many of the marks are arranged in a way that cannot be explained by manual labor. They form a grid that resembles ancient markings, possibly related to planning. If we consider these marks as part of a unified system, it follows that the construction of Tirans was not simply an engineering process, but a mathematically precise one. Standing at the foot of the wall, you sense its extraordinary power. The stones seem to radiate calm and simultaneously offer a warning. This place was created with a purpose that only ancient masters could comprehend. Perhaps they understood the properties of stone better than we do. Perhaps they knew how to fortify structures so that they would withstand both time and the elements. Or perhaps they were simply following a tradition that remains undecipherable to this day. Tirans makes no attempt to reveal its secrets. It stands on a hill just as it did centuries ago, and when the wind blows between the stone ledges, it seems as if the walls still hold the memory of their creators. There is no fuss, no trace of hasty work, only concentration, calculation, and strength, a reminder that the ancient world was not so primitive. And as long as the walls stand, Tirans remains a living reminder that some secrets defy time and continue to evoke wonder and awe. Ruins of Pavlopetri. Off the southern coast of Laconia, where the water is so clear you can see every shadow on the seabed, lies one of Greece's most mysterious sunken cities, Pavlopetri. Its ruins lie just a few meters below the sea's surface, yet they feel like peering through a window into a world that vanished suddenly and completely. These are more than just the remains of buildings. They are the remains of a civilization about which too little is known, seemingly lost in time. As you approach the spot where the submerged city begins, the water suddenly darkens. The street contours gradually emerge like patterns on old fabric. Remnants of roads, rectangular perimeters of houses, and even traces of intersections are visible. It seems as if the city wasn't destroyed, but simply gently lowered beneath the water. This smoothness of lines evokes the feeling of a break in time, as if life stopped in one unexpected moment. The main mystery of Pavlopetri is its age and sudden demise. The precise time of its existence is difficult to determine. Some researchers believe it was inhabited many centuries before the famous centers of Greek culture flourished. This makes Pavlopetri one of the oldest known cities, and its very existence rewrites the understanding of the region's early settlements. But the main intrigue lies in why the city ended up underwater. There's a theory that tectonic shifts were the cause. The ground in these areas is indeed unstable, and strong tremors could have caused a sudden subsidence of part of the coastline. But this explanation doesn't explain why the lines of the buildings have remained so perfectly aligned. Looking into the water, you realize the houses stand as if they weren't destroyed by the force of nature, but simply submerged by the water, leaving their forms virtually intact. The street structure is particularly striking. They intersect at right angles, and some buildings are arranged as if they were part of a single architectural plan. Even today, not every settlement follows such a precise layout. But here, at the bottom of the sea, lies a city built with harmony and calculation. This evokes the feeling that the people who created Pavlopetri possessed knowledge that has not been preserved in other parts of the region. Sometimes the sea reveals strange signs. Diving underwater, researchers notice splashes of sand in some places, as if the seabed were breathing. It seems as if even deeper levels are hidden beneath the urban landscape. Stone vaults, corridors, mysterious recesses, all of these could be part of hidden structures that no one has yet reached. Perhaps Pavlopetri was not just a city, but a center where important rituals or gatherings took place, and some of these spaces are buried deep beneath the silt. Local fishermen claim that faint lights sometimes appear at night over parts of the flooded city. They resemble a halo that moves along the edges of the ruins. This phenomenon is rare, but those who have witnessed it describe the light as soft and even, as if emanating not from the surface, but from the depths. Such stories are difficult to verify, but they underscore the main point. Pavlopetri has a life of its own, and the night only enhances its hidden atmosphere. What also seems puzzling is the lack of evidence of destruction in the city. Stones aren't scattered, walls haven't collapsed. It looks as if the residents managed to abandon their homes before the waters began to rise. But why did they leave? And if they did, why didn't they leave traces in other areas? This question remains unanswered. Perhaps the settlement was small and didn't manage to leave a noticeable mark on history. Or perhaps its inhabitants simply vanished, blending in with other tribes, leaving behind neither written records nor clearly distinguishable artifacts. Another interesting fact concerns underwater sounds. Those who dive to depths of several meters above the ruins sometimes report a strange vibration, as if the city were still breathing. The sound resembles a distant hum that persists even when the sea is calm. It's difficult to detect with instruments, but people hear it quite clearly. Perhaps this is the effect of certain underwater currents, or perhaps it's an echo of the city's hidden structure responding to the movement of the water. Occasionally, the current lifts small pieces of pottery from the bottom. These fragments are striking in their thickness and shape. Some are so smoothly chiseled, as if they were made with a tool that ensured uniform rotation. But such tools appeared much later than the supposed age of Pavlopetri. This raises the question, do we truly know everything about ancient technology? Or were their skills far more diverse than modern sources suggest? Pavlopetri is one of those towns that doesn't shout about its mystery. It simply lies at the bottom, quiet and level, open to anyone willing to dive in and glimpse its past. But the more time you spend here examining its streets and walls, the stronger the feeling grows that this town is hiding something important. It's as if, through its silence, it's saying it was part of a history that has yet to be fully revealed. When you rise to the surface and gaze at the sea that conceals the city, you realize that Pavlopetri is more than just ruins. It's a window into an era whose traces remain only here, underwater. a city that has survived everything, including time, and now guards its secrets at the bottom of a dark lagoon, awaiting the moment when a person can hear its history, not only with their eyes and instruments, but also with an inner sense capable of capturing the silence of the ancient world. Temple of Delphi. On the slopes of Mount Parnassus, where the air is filled with the scent of pine needles and ancient herbs, lie the ruins of the Delphic sanctuary. Today, tourists come here, but few realize that this very place was considered the center of the world for centuries, and not only because of the legend of the Omphalos stone. Delphi has always been a site of unusual phenomena, so unusual that even after many centuries, they raise questions that remain unanswered. As you climb the stone path leading to the Temple of Apollo, you sense the unique rhythm of this place. The air feels denser, every word seems quieter, every footstep clearer. This isn't just an effect of altitude. Researchers have long noticed the strange acoustics of Delphi. Sound here behaves as if someone is gently redirecting it. Some areas amplify the sound, others suppress it. In ancient times, such peculiarities may have seemed like the voices of the gods. The temple's main secret is connected to the Pythia, a priestess who gave prophecies. Many try to explain her condition by the effects of vapors emanating from cracks beneath the temple. But even if this theory is accepted, one important question remains. Why were such cracks only found here, and why did their influence produce clear, structured visions rather than chaos? It would seem that the vapors should disrupt consciousness, but stories speak of something quite the opposite, of concentration and a sharp, acute sense of truth. Ancient texts describe the temple as standing above the navel of the earth, a place where subterranean forces converged. If we imagine that the depths of Mount Parnassus contain a network of voids through which air flows, it becomes clear why the unusual pressure is felt here. Even today, tourists sometimes notice a barely perceptible vibration in the ground at certain points. This is not an earthquake, but a weak, pulsating tremor, felt only for a moment. There are theories that the temple was built specifically in a location with a natural concentration of acoustic and energetic effects. If you stand for a long time in certain areas, you can feel a slight pressure on your temples. At other points, it feels as if your chest becomes heavier. These effects are uneven. They create the feeling that the space here functions as an instrument that can influence a person's state of mind. Perhaps the ancients knew this and used these properties in their rituals. The shape of the temple itself is particularly striking. Its base is slightly offset from the hill, creating the strange sensation that it stands not on the ground, but slightly off-center. Some researchers believe this orientation may have heightened the perception of certain sounds or vibrations. But why the temple was oriented this way remains unclear. Perhaps it has to do with lines considered sacred by the ancients. There are stories of quiet footsteps sometimes heard near the temple at night. They move across the stone slabs, but no one is present. A similar sound is produced by wind passing through the voids between the stones, but the footsteps are too rhythmic. Travelers of the last century wrote of feeling a presence they couldn't explain. It's not fear, but rather a feeling of being watched. As if the place continues to live its ancient life, even when there are no people around. No less mysterious is the phenomenon of whispers. Sometimes the wind at Delphi creates a sound reminiscent of a quiet voice. It's not like a normal howl, it seems to repeat phrases, but so blurred that they're indecipherable. They can only be heard at certain hours, most often at the border between day and night. Old legends say these are the voices of past seers, seemingly gliding along the slopes of Parnassus, leaving the ear strained and the mind alert. Enormous columns once towered over the temple. Today they're in ruins, but even their bases convey a powerful sense of scale. The colonnade is particularly impressive, with sound propagating around it in an unusual way. When you clap your hands near one of the columns, you hear a repetition coming from an unexpected direction. The echo seems to bend around the walls rather than reflect off them. This sensation is created by some internal structure which may have been part of the overall acoustic design of the ancient builders. Among the ruins is the so-called breathing stone. It's an ordinary slab at first glance, but if you place your hand on it, you can feel a slight warmth. On sunny days, this is easy to explain, but the warmth is also felt on cold evenings, when the other stones have long since cooled. Locals say that in ancient times, this slab was considered a point through which one could feel the pulse of the earth. Perhaps this is a beautiful legend, but when you stand on this spot, you truly experience a strange sense of connection with the depths. Another mystery of Delphi is the missing steps. Old descriptions suggest that the temple had a staircase leading to a hidden chamber, but neither archaeologists nor researchers have found any clear traces of such a passage. However, in the lower part of the sanctuary, there is a section where the stones lie unusually evenly, as if someone had sealed the entrance. If so, then beneath the temple, there may be a hidden space that has never been discovered and that could have played an important role in the rituals. Standing beside the temple ruins and looking down upon the valley, you understand why the ancients considered this place the center of the world. It's not just roads that converge here. It's a profound inner feeling. The air on Parnassus is thick, the earth seems to breathe, and the silence carries vibrations that cannot be explained by nature alone. The Temple of Delphi remains not only an archaeological site, but also one of those corners of the earth where you sense the presence of ancient forces living beyond sight. And this is precisely what makes Delphi not just ruins, but a space that is simultaneously silent and speaking to anyone willing to listen. Mask of Mycenae. In the Mycenaean treasury, among gold jewelry, bronze blades, and carved bowls, an object was discovered that became a symbol of an entire era. It is a gold mask which lay on the face of a man buried in a deep pit near an ancient palace. The mask is called silent, not only because of its motionless expression, but also because it has yet to reveal its true story. What you see here is not just decoration, but an attempt by ancient people to preserve the face of someone who likely played a vital role in the life of the city. When you examine the mask, the first thing that strikes you is its calm. The facial features are soft, the eyes are closed, the lips are slightly pressed together. It seems as if the person isn't dead, but simply asleep. This is strange, because other funerary masks of the time are much cruder. They seem to have rushed to capture the shape of the face, whereas here there is a deliberateness and attention to detail. Every line is engraved with a precision that seems unexpected for the era. The main mystery lies in the identity of this person. Some believe the mask belonged to a ruler who ruled Mycenae during its heyday. Others are convinced it was a model created by a master for a specific ritual. But another theory holds that the mask belonged to no one in particular. It could have been a symbol placed on the face of the deceased to emphasize their transition to the other world. In this case, the expression of calm becomes part of the overall design, to show that the person had passed on without fear. The material itself is intriguing. The mask is made of the finest gold, which bends easily but retains its shape for centuries. The craftsman had to work extremely carefully. One wrong move, and the gold would have torn. But the mask's surface shows no signs of rough work. The lines appear as if the gold wasn't cut or hammered with crude tools, but rather gently guided, as if molded to a predetermined shape. There are theories that the artist first created a mold from another material, perhaps wood or wax. He then applied gold leaf to it, pressing it to follow every curve of the face. But this raises a question. If the mask was made to fit an individual face, why do the features appear idealized, almost symbolic? It's neither a portrait nor a stylization. It's something in between, which makes one wonder about the object's function. When the mask was discovered, objects of clear significance were found around it. Jewelry, weapons, and vessels were found, seemingly carefully placed around the body. This arrangement could indicate a person of high power or status. However, what's odd is that some of the objects appear too new for the depth at which they were buried. This has led to speculation that the burial was a special one, conducted in several stages. If so, the mask could have been part of a ritual that lasted for a long time. What's also interesting is that the mask itself is almost undamaged, although other objects around it have been damaged or corroded. It seems as if the gold of this mask has special properties. This could, of course, be explained by the durability of the metal, but nevertheless, it seems as if the mask was created not for decoration, but to preserve the person's face in perfect condition. It's as if the tomb's builders understood that the mask needed to survive the centuries. Some researchers wonder, was there really a tradition in Mycenae of creating idealized faces of their rulers? If so, the mask could have been part of a more complex belief system. For example, it could have symbolized the passage of the soul, a reminder of the human image that remains after death. Or perhaps the mask was the image of a worshipped ancestor, hence its meticulous crafting. Legends from the surrounding villages tell of a man whose face eternally stared through gold. Locals said the mask captured not the features of the deceased, but their essence. And if you stare long enough into the mask's eyes, you can feel a strange tension, as if someone is watching you back. Such stories seem like fantasy, but many note that the mask truly evokes a sense of presence. The eyes, though closed, appear alive, and the facial expression leaves a powerful impression. What's particularly interesting is how the mask changes expression in the evening sun. When the light falls at an angle, the lines on the face become sharper, and the eyes deepen. The face can go from calm to serious, or even stern. This is no illusion. The golden surface reflects the light so that every shadow plays its own role. This behavior creates the impression that the mask has a life of its own and is capable of conveying emotions. There's another mystery. The mask seems too large for a human face. It doesn't simply cover the face, it seems to hang over it, creating the impression of a protective mask. Some believe its size could have been a symbol of power, emphasizing the individual's importance. If so, the mask was not simply a funerary attribute, but an important part of the cult of rulers. The inner surface of the mask is remarkably smooth. It leaves no marks on the skin and has no sharp edges. This speaks to a high level of craftsmanship and an understanding of how such an object should feel on the face. However, there are no signs of fastenings or straps that would have held the mask in place. This means it lay on the face naturally, without being tied. It may have been part of a special burial ritual in which the body was positioned so that the mask would not move. Today, the mask is kept in a museum, but looking at it, it's easy to forget that it's just a thin sheet of gold. It seems to truly contain the story of a man who lived in an era where the boundaries between ritual and reality were much thinner than they are today. You look at this mask and it seems to stare back. It's silent, but its silence speaks of power, fear, solemnity, and the fact that the man hidden beneath the golden layer longed to be seen after many centuries. And it is precisely this feeling that makes the Mask of Mycenae one of Greece's most enigmatic finds. An object that holds within itself the silence of an entire era and reminds us that the past sometimes speaks louder than the present, if we listen carefully. Eupalinos Tunnel. On the island of Samos, hidden among hills covered with pine trees and low shrubs, lies one of the most bizarre engineering structures of the ancient world, the Tunnel of Eupalinos. It's called an architectural marvel, but the more you look at its structure, the less you want to use the words ordinary or practical. What you see here isn't just a water supply system. It's an underground corridor carved out of the mountainside as if its builders possessed a spatial understanding that we still admire today. When you approach the tunnel entrance, it seems like an ordinary stone passageway. Nothing remarkable. But once you step inside, a different sensation begins. The silence becomes dense, the walls seem too smooth, and the tunnel's shape too precise. It stretches deep underground, following the curves of the hill, but never deviating from its course. This creates the feeling that the builders had foreseen the entire path in advance, as if the mountain were transparent to them. The main mystery is that the tunnel was cut simultaneously from both sides. This means that two independent teams of craftsmen must have met in the middle of the mountain, unable to adjust their direction along the surface. Even with modern tools, such a task would be difficult. But ancient people were able to penetrate more than 1,000 meters of stone and reach a precision so small as to seem incredible. When you imagine how the craftsmen worked, it becomes even stranger. They descended into narrow shafts, lit their way with torches, and cut stone by hand. They navigated using only simple tools that today seem primitive, but horizontal orientation is only part of the task. Even more astonishing is that they maintained the tunnel's height with an accuracy of several tens of centimeters. It seems as if they had access to knowledge that was later lost. There's a theory that the builders used a system of angles and triangles, creating a kind of hidden geometric grid. But even if we imagine this, the question remains: how did they control deviations underground if the slightest misalignment would instantly lead them astray? In some places, the tunnel takes a sharp angle, turns, and then returns to a straight path. This looks like a route designed by someone with an intimate understanding of the mountain's internal structure. The tunnel's shape itself seems no less mysterious. Its walls are slanted, forming a slight trapezoidal profile. These walls are more stable, but one senses that the shape has another meaning. It creates unique acoustics. If you stand at one end of the tunnel and speak quietly, the sound travels deep, as if flowing down the stone. It doesn't reverberate sharply, but fades away, becoming lost in space. This behavior of the sound could have been part of the design, perhaps so that workers could hear each other over great distances. There are areas where the stone appears different, as if it had been cut rather than hewn. It's smooth, free of irregularities, as if the craftsman used something more precise rather than crude tools. This doesn't indicate an unknown technology, but it does suggest the builders knew how to create different surfaces for different purposes. They could have altered the wall structure to control airflow or moisture. Sometimes a slight movement of air can be felt inside the tunnel. This is strange, as the passage is located deep underground and has a limited number of exits. But a breeze appears in certain places, as if someone has opened an invisible door. This airflow may be due to temperature fluctuations, but it creates the sensation of a hidden network of voids or side passages that have not yet been explored. There are also mystical theories. Some residents of Samos say the tunnel has not only a practical, but also a ritualistic history. They believe the underground passage symbolized a transition to another state, a journey from light to darkness, from the world of the living to the world of secret knowledge. This explains the tunnel's strange atmosphere. As you walk along the narrow corridor, illuminated only by the dim light of a lamp, you get the feeling that space is watching, not hostilely, but attentively. Sometimes tourists report hearing strange sounds deep in the tunnel. Not footsteps, not drops of water, but light taps, as if someone were running a tool along the wall. When the sound arrives, there's nothing there. Such stories are rare, but they create an image of the tunnel as a living space that responds to human presence. Perhaps it's simply a play of echoes, but in a cramped underground corridor, even ordinary sounds become part of the legend. There are also more mundane questions. For example, why does the tunnel have branches? Some of them are narrow, short, and led to dead ends. Their purpose is unclear. They could have served as ventilation shafts. But it's especially odd that some of the dead ends appear smoothly chiseled, as if they once contained a door or passageway that was later sealed. Such finds raise the question, was the tunnel part of a larger underground system of which only this visible portion remains? Today, the Eupalinos Tunnel is recognized as one of the greatest engineering achievements of antiquity. But the more one studies its structure, the less one feels fully understood. Every meter raises questions. Every wall reveals traces of different stages of construction, and every turn hints at the ancient master's mastery of an art that combined geometric knowledge, intuition, and perhaps something else modern researchers can't even precisely define. When you emerge from the tunnel back into the light, a strange feeling of respect overcomes you. The place doesn't oppress or intimidate, but leaves you with the feeling of having passed through a space where labor and mystery are so intertwined that it's impossible to separate one from the other. The Eupalinos Tunnel remains one of the most enigmatic structures in Greece, a corridor that connects not only the two sides of the mountain, but also ancient knowledge with our own attempts to understand just how far the people who lived many centuries ago could have gone. Zones of Samothrace. The island of Samothrace is hidden from major tourist routes. Its steep slopes are covered in dense forest, and its shores are strewn with boulders that look as if they were washed up by an ancient, untamed wave. But the island's greatest mystery lies in its so-called power zones, areas of land where space behaves differently. People here experience unusual vibrations, strange air pressure, and sudden mood swings, as if the island speaks to everyone who crosses its borders. As you walk along the trail leading deep into Samothrace, at first everything seems normal. The air is fresh and you can hear the babbling of streams. But then, in certain areas, the sensation changes. Sounds become quieter, as if someone were turning down the volume of the world. The wind dies down, and the space seems to shrink. People who pass through such areas often report feeling a slight chill, even on a warm day. It's not a physical cold, but a kind of coolness that passes through the skin, but leaves no trace. The areas near the island's old sanctuaries are particularly mysterious. Samothrace was venerated even in ancient times, and many came here for initiation into the mysteries. Some believed the island was a place of communication with invisible forces. And when you stand among the stones of the old ruins, it becomes clear why. The ground here seems to vibrate. It's barely perceptible, but the longer you stand, the more you feel a subtle tremor coursing through the soles of your shoes and rising upward. It's not frightening, but it creates tension, as if the body is responding to a hidden signal. There are areas where trees grow at odd angles. Their trunks are twisted, as if reaching toward an invisible source. Roots emerge to the surface, intertwining in complex patterns. It seems as if nature here followed not its usual logic, but another hidden pattern. Researchers try to explain this by soil or wind conditions, but many admit the shape of some trees is too unusual and too repetitive to be considered random. One of the most well-known phenomena is the sharp surge of energy felt by people in the area of the ancient sanctuary of the great gods. Standing between the columns, some of which are almost completely destroyed, one feels as if the space is becoming denser. Breathing becomes slightly heavier, while thoughts, on the contrary, become clearer. Such contradictory sensations are difficult to explain. Some claim it's the result of the specific arrangement of the stones. Others say the earth here is truly imbued with a special power accumulated over many centuries. Sometimes sounds resembling a hum or low whisper are heard in these areas. They appear unexpectedly, last for a few seconds, and disappear just as suddenly. It's not wind or animals. The sound is too uniform, as if coming from underground. People who have heard it describe a sensation as if the sound passes through the body, causing no harm but leaving a strange aftertaste. Such episodes are difficult to record because instruments behave erratically in these areas. The needles deflect, and the sensors register changes that quickly disappear. There are areas where the compass shows an incorrect direction. The needle can slowly turn, pointing not north, but toward Mount Saios. This isn't a constant effect, but it recurs frequently enough to be noticeable. Because of this, many locals believe there are areas of magnetic anomaly deep within the island. But even if this is true, why do these areas coincide with places considered sacred by the ancients? Sometimes people report feeling a presence in certain areas of Samothrace that's difficult to describe. It's not fear or the sensation of being shadowed. It's a feeling of being watched, soft, calm, non-threatening, yet distinct. It's as if the place is curious about whoever stands there. This sensation doesn't follow a person around the island, but manifests only in strictly defined areas, which makes the phenomenon even more intriguing. A particularly unusual sensation arises around old stones surrounded by moss and low grass. If you place your palm on one of the stones, you can sometimes feel a barely perceptible warmth. It's not related to the sun. Such sensations occur even in the shade. This warmth doesn't remain if you remove your hand. It seems to arise only at the moment of contact. Some researchers have suggested that the stones retain their heat due to their special structure. But local residents believe otherwise. They believe the stones are part of an ancient network that maintains a connection to the past. Sometimes at night, a faint shimmer can be seen in these areas. It doesn't resemble the light of a lantern or the reflection of water. It's a soft, diffused glimmer, similar to moonlight, but emanating not from above, but from the side, from ground level. People who have witnessed this phenomenon say it lasts only a few seconds. Then the glimmer disappears, leaving the question, what could have created such a glow? Samothrace is an island that doesn't easily reveal its secrets. It demands silence, attention, and respect. But if you approach it with an open mind, you can sense what the ancients felt, that the island is not just land amidst the sea, but a place where worlds intersect, where the air carries the memory of centuries, and the stones still remember those who came here in search of knowledge and protection. The zones of Samothrace remain a mystery. Perhaps they are connected to geology, perhaps to ancient rituals, or perhaps they are one and the same, and people of the past were able to find a connection between nature and a world we can only sense today, but not explain. And this is precisely what makes Samothrace a place where silence becomes a voice, and the earth a keeper of secrets that remain powerful even after many millennia. Oracle of the Necromantian. In western Greece, among hills covered in olive groves, stands a place the ancients believed to be the gateway to the world of the dead. This is the Necromanteon, a sanctuary where people came not to ask the gods for favors, but to seek answers from those who had already passed beyond. Today, there are only ruins here, but if you listen, the air holds the memory of voices that sounded many centuries ago. And the land itself seems to remind you. In this place, reality once bent under the weight of another force. As you approach the sanctuary, the feeling changes. The air becomes heavier and the silence thicker. Sounds seem to muffle themselves, as if the place doesn't accept any unnecessary noise. The ruins stand on a hill, but the space feels enclosed, as if you're descending rather than ascending. This perception creates a slight tension, as if the boundaries of the world are shrinking with each step. The Necromanteon's main mystery lies underground. Legend has it that it housed a chamber where those seeking to communicate with the dead descended. People would come here after lengthy purifications, undergo complex rituals, and then enter dark chambers where the torchlight trembled, as if the very air were rippling with an invisible breath. Many reported hearing a voice in these chambers that did not sound human. It was soft, muffled, as if speaking through thick stone. Archaeologists have discovered underground corridors, but their structure raises questions. The passages twist and turn strangely, forming loops and dead ends. It seems as if the layout was designed to confuse people. This could have been part of a ritual, whereby a person loses their bearings to become more receptive to inner experiences. But there's a theory that the corridors were built to direct sound, and if we imagine hidden holes or cavities within, it becomes clear that even the slightest whisper could have been reflected dozens of times, turning into a multitude of voices. Some researchers claim there are zones within the sanctuary where sound disappears completely. If a word is spoken at a certain point, it is absorbed. The mouth moves, but the air seems to block the sound. This phenomenon is difficult to explain solely by the shape of the room. It creates the feeling that the space in these places has its own rules, as if someone or something is using the stone like a tool. The layout of some rooms seems equally strange. There's a room where the walls converge in such a way that the torchlight reflects unnaturally. The flame appears elongated, as if pulled in one direction. Shadows on the walls move slowly, as if suspended in the air. This behavior of the light is sometimes attributed to drafts, but there's virtually no air movement inside the underground complex. This creates the impression that the light is interacting with a space that contains something other than stone. Ancient tales mention a drink given to those who wished to hear the voices of the dead. It consisted of plants native to the area. It may have induced an altered state of consciousness. But even if so, the very space of the necromantian enhanced the effect. Many reported feeling a presence immediately upon entering the underground section. They saw no one, but felt themselves being watched. The feeling wasn't hostile, but insistent. There's a legend about a priest who claimed to hear dozens of voices simultaneously. They spoke quietly but clearly. When he tried to locate the source, the sounds disappeared, as if they had retreated deeper into the walls. If we imagine that there are hidden cavities underground that we have yet to discover, then such stories take on a new dimension. Perhaps the sound really did travel through the stone network, creating the illusion of multiple voices. Even more mysterious is the central underground chamber. It's almost square, but the corners are designed in such a way that sound reflects strangely. If you stand in the center, the walls seem closer than they actually are, creating a sense of compression of space. Some call this a pressure effect, which occurs when air interacts with the shape of the room. But others believe the chamber was specifically designed to induce this sensation. This explains why people believed they heard voices. Their own thoughts were amplified by the acoustics. There are also physical oddities. Some pieces of stone show traces resembling charring, but there are no traces of fire nearby, and the stone is too dense to be charred by ordinary flame. The marks appear to be heated from within. Researchers have found no explanation, but these marks reinforce the impression that the sanctuary space was used in rituals involving fire or heat, generated in unusual ways. Sometimes at night, locals hear a low rumble coming from the ruins. It's rare, but always sudden. The rumble resembles a distant growl that doesn't repeat, as if the earth were letting out a short sigh. Many attribute it to wind or soil, but those who heard the sound up close insist it was too steady, too deep to be random. Standing in the necromantion, it's easy to forget you're in the tourist era. The silence here is thick, and even daylight seems dim. The place draws you in, forcing you to listen to your own breathing. And it's in moments like these that you understand why the ancients chose this sanctuary to communicate with the dead. Here, the world of the living subtly intersects with the hidden, and it doesn't matter whether the voice people heard was real or an inner one. The space itself creates the feeling that the line between worlds once seemed much thinner than it does today. Heads of Naxos. In the central part of the island of Naxos, far from coastal roads and tourist trails, among hills overgrown with wild grasses and thorny bushes, stand strange stone figures. They are called the Naxos heads. These enormous, almost human-like figures are carved into the rock, as if the artisans attempted to define facial features, but never completed the work. Some figures lie half-buried, others rise up, as if observing their surroundings. Their origin, purpose, and age remain a mystery. When you first approach one of the heads, it seems to be part of the rock, but change your angle, and the outlines become apparent. Cheekbones, a nose, a jawline. The face seems to be looking away, as if observing something. These figures don't resemble typical statues. They seem to be born from the stone, not carved. Their disproportion and unevenness create the feeling that you're not looking at a person, but at a creature forever imprinted in the stone. What's interesting is that the heads are spaced far apart. They don't form a temple or an avenue. Each one stands alone, in places where the rock juts out. This arrangement gives the impression that the ancient craftsmen used natural protrusions to shape them. But if so, why did they only make heads? And why did they leave the work unfinished? Perhaps they intended to create entire figures, but work suddenly stopped. Or perhaps the heads were part of a ritual, symbols of watching over the earth. Some researchers believe these heads may have been associated with the cult of local spirits or ancestors. Their location on hills made them visible from afar. And if we imagine that ancient people believed the earth was alive and had its own gaze, then the figures could have been a way to mark important locations, a crossroads, a water source, or the boundary of a settlement. Then the facial expression, calm, slightly detached, becomes a meaningful element, not just an artistic choice. But there's another peculiarity. Some of the heads bear traces of brutal blows, as if someone had tried to destroy them. Several have visible cracks that appear too straight, as if they were made with a tool. This raises the question, was the destruction accidental or intentional? If intentional, then who wanted to get rid of these stone faces, and why? Perhaps, after a change in beliefs, the figures became symbols of an old cult that needed to be destroyed. Even more intriguing is the unusual structure of the ground in some areas near the heads. The soil is darker, denser, and sometimes even slightly magnetic. Such properties are rare in natural conditions. This has led to speculation that the heads may have been part of a system of landmarks or even a unique way of interacting with the Earth's magnetic field. While this sounds daring, the fact remains. Near some of the heads, instruments show slight deviations. Furthermore, the surroundings of the figures exhibit strange acoustics. If you stand next to one of the heads and speak, the sound reverberates unexpectedly softly, as if absorbed by the surrounding space. But if you stand a little further away, the echo returns after a long pause, creating the effect of a vast void. This behavior of the sound is difficult to explain solely by the shape of the hills. It seems the heads influence the acoustics, creating zones of amplification and attenuation of sound waves. Some locals tell strange stories. They claim the heads seem to change expressions at night. It's certainly a play of light and shadow, but the shadows on these stones move in an unusual way. When the moon is low, the figures seem to come alive. The shadows create the illusion of movement, and the facial lines become sharper. People say it sometimes feels as if the head's eyes are following you, even when you're standing to the side. There's a legend about a craftsman who was attempting to complete one of the heads, but then disappeared. Locals said he heard sounds within the rock, thuds, rustling sounds, as if the stone were moving. When he vanished, only his tools and part of an unfinished face were found nearby. This is just a legend, but it underscores how Naxos folklore perceives these heads as living entities, not just ancient ruins. There are also scholarly theories. Some believe the heads were part of gigantic statues that were never separated from the rock. This explains the crude forms and lack of detail. Perhaps the artisans intended to create figures several meters tall, but were unable to complete the work due to destruction or conflict. However, the question remains: why are these statues so far apart? Their scattered presence across the hills suggests something else, a symbolic, not decorative meaning. Today, the Naxos heads stand motionless. The winds sweep across their features, the sun softens their lines, and the rains leave fine furrows on the surface. But even now, they don't look like ordinary monuments. They seem to be waiting. Their expression is a mixture of calm and attentiveness. As you approach, the lids seem to deepen. The corners of the mouth seem to suggest the figure holds a secret it won't reveal. The Naxos heads are a piece of history that defies easy explanation. Perhaps they were symbols, perhaps ritual markers, or perhaps simply an attempt to express something the ancients felt but could not convey in any other way. When you stand before one of these figures, you feel an invisible thread stretching between you and the stone, and it seems that if you listen long enough, the stone will whisper something that has remained silent for centuries. Fola slub. High in the Peloponnese Mountains, on slopes where the air becomes thick and cool in the evenings, and the scent of pine mingles with the dampness of the stone, lies a strange artifact known locally as the Tholos slab. It is a huge stone block, flat and smooth on top, as if polished not by time, but by someone's hand. Lines etched into its surface resemble neither writing nor decoration. They form a grid of angular patterns and smooth arcs, reminiscent of a map, a coded symbol, or the traces of an ancient ritual. As you approach the slab, you're struck by its unusual shape. It seems detached from the surrounding rock. The surrounding stone is rough and cracked, while the slab itself is smooth, as if carved and transported from another location. This raises questions. Why does it lie so high, far from ancient roads and settlements? And why is its surface still so largely intact, despite strong winds and sudden temperature changes? The main mystery is the patterns. They are shallow but smooth, as if carved with a tool not found in archaeological finds in the region. The stripes intersect at regular angles, as if following a mathematical pattern. Some lines form multiple parallels, while others form arcs that resemble the outlines of unknown figures. People have tried to match these patterns to known scripts, but none have worked. The patterns appear too abstract, yet too organized to be random. There's a theory that the slab may have been part of an astronomical device. If the patterns are viewed as trajectories or positions of celestial bodies, some lines do indeed align with important points in the sky visible from this mountain. But even if this is true, it raises the question, who and why raised such a stone to a height where even today it's difficult to work without specialized equipment? Another mystery is the reactions of people who have come into contact with the slab. Some claim to feel a slight warmth when touching its surface. Even on a cold evening, the stone seems to emit a subtle, barely perceptible heat. This may be a characteristic of the rock, but other stones around it are cold. Only the slab retains this property. Some researchers believe the stone has an unusual structure that accumulates heat from sunlight, but even they admit the effect is also observed at night, long after the sun has set. The sound is particularly striking. If you tap the slab, it produces a dull but distinct tone. It resembles the sound of a large metal disc. But the slab is made of stone, and such a sound seems impossible. It doesn't reverberate like metal, but rather seems to pass through the thickness of the slab, penetrating deep into the earth. In some places, the sound changes. It becomes higher or lower, depending on the point of impact. This creates the impression that voids or chambers may be hidden beneath the slab. Some speculate that the Tholos slab is the lid of an ancient underground structure. This explanation explains the sound and heat, but raises new questions. Who could have created such a structure without leaving any traces? And why has no entrance or opening been discovered? Perhaps the passage was closed or filled in. However, neither archaeology nor geology has yet provided convincing evidence to support this hypothesis. Legend has it that the slab was associated with the ancient hero Tholos, who, according to myths, lived in these parts. He was considered a wise and hospitable being, knowing the paths through the mountains. Perhaps the slab served as a landmark or a sacred place where rituals were performed. These legends say that at night, a soft light appeared on the slab, like a reflection of the moon. But the source was not in the sky, but beneath the surface of the stone. Such stories are impossible to verify, but they emphasize that people have long perceived the slab as an object containing something living. An equally strange phenomenon concerns the vegetation. Trees grow sparser around the slab. The grass along its edges is thin, low, and lighter in color. It appears the soil here has a different composition. Perhaps the slab is releasing substances or influencing the soil temperature. But this means the stone has properties that require much more detailed study. Another observation is the change in the sound of the wind. When the wind passes over the slab, it becomes soft, as if flowing around an invisible form. In other parts of the hill, the wind is sharp and uneven, but near the slab, it is muffled, even in strong gusts. This creates the sensation that there is something above the surface that is altering the air movement. Perhaps the patterns on the slab act as a system of guides, but if so, why? Some people claim to have seen movements of light on the slab. Not lights, not flashes, but a subtle, barely noticeable shifting of light, as if a weak wave were passing through the stone. Such observations are rare and brief, but they occur frequently enough to be worth ignoring. Perhaps it's the play of cloud shadows, but observers insist the effect occurs even in cloudless weather. When you stand next to the folus slab, you get the feeling it's watching you. Not threatening, not attracting, but assessing. The stone is motionless, and everything around it seems to freeze. The slab seems like a center around which silence is building. And the longer you look at the patterns, the more you sense they're not just lines, but part of a single message left behind by people or beings who understood this world differently. The folus slab remains one of Greece's most untold mysteries. Its patterns are silent, but its shape and properties scream that something more lies hidden here. Perhaps it's a map, perhaps a sign, or perhaps a lid revealing something yet to be discovered. And as long as the slab remains in place, it holds a secret that time has yet to reveal. Shadows of Matapan. At the southernmost tip of the Peloponnese lies Cape Matapan, a place where the sea seems too deep and the wind too cold, even in summer. The ancients believed that one of the entrances to the underworld was located here. And when you find yourself among the stones, jagged cliffs, and empty paths, you understand why. There is a phenomenon here called the shadows of Matapan, strange silhouettes appearing on the rocks and water, even though there are no people or moving objects nearby. Approaching the cape at dusk, the first thing you notice is the silence. The sea sounds, but its roar seems to recede dully. The cliffs overhang, creating sharp edges of light. And it's at these moments that shadows begin to appear on the rocks. They appear as dark silhouettes, sometimes resembling human figures, sometimes animals. But the most frightening thing is that they don't move as normal shadows should. They don't follow the observer's form, nor do they follow the sun or moon. They exist on their own. Shadows most often appear where rocks form natural outcrops. But as you get closer, they disappear. This always happens at the same distance, as if the shadow senses its presence. As soon as you retreat, it reappears. This creates the feeling that this isn't just an optical illusion, but something that reacts to movement. Some researchers have tried to explain the phenomenon by the reflection of light off the water. But shadows also appear when the sea is completely calm. There are areas where shadows move across the rocks, as if walking alongside them. They move slowly but steadily, as if guided by an invisible force. Sometimes the shadow takes the form of a person standing sideways. Sometimes it's an elongated figure, resembling an ancient tall pillar. People who see this for the first time often feel uneasy, as if they're being watched from another time. Many on the Cape say, "The shadow watches," even if it has no eyes. Locals tell tales of fishermen seeing a shadow right above the water. It stood motionless, as if hovering above the surface, then slowly dissolved, leaving a chill. Such incidents are rare, but they recur over the years. The fishermen are certain it wasn't a reflection because there were no boats, lighthouses, or other light sources nearby. Only the moon and the shadow, seemingly living by its own rules. A particularly strange sensation arises near the old cave on the Cape. Legends call it the Gates of Hades. It's always dark inside, even during the day, and long shadows often appear at the entrance, resembling outstretched arms or figures leaning forward. Some claim the shadows only appear when a person stands still. Take a step, and they disappear. But if you remain in silence for a few minutes, the figures reappear, as if approaching. It is believed that the Matapan shadows are caused by the unique shape of the rocks, which reflect light from unexpected angles. However, this theory does not fully explain the movement of the shadows against the direction of the source. Sometimes the shadow moves in a direction from which no light falls. This leads some researchers to speculate that the rocks on the cape may have a special structure that reflects light differently than ordinary stone. However, this explanation also does not fully explain the phenomenon. Another strange element has to do with sound. People standing near the places where shadows appear sometimes hear a low humming sound. It's faint, barely perceptible, but constant. The sound seems to emanate from the rock itself. If you listen closely, you can feel a slight pressure in your ears. Perhaps these are vibrations from the rock, but they only appear at certain times, most often before sunset. And it's precisely during these hours that the shadows are most distinct and mobile. Some claim that shadows sometimes mimic a person's movements, but with a delay. If they raise their hand, after a few seconds, the shadow does the same, but not exactly, as if distorted. This behavior makes the phenomenon even more unsettling. People who have experienced this say they felt a strange separation, as if part of their reflection had broken away and taken on a life of its own. The moon creates a unique atmosphere on Matapan. Under its light, shadows become longer and darker. Sometimes they stretch for tens of meters along the cliffs, creating the appearance of a procession of figures moving along the headlands. Yet, not a single sound disturbs the silence. This sense of a procession without participants has long been part of local folklore. People call these shadows guardians, who guard the entrance to the underworld. Some stories say the shadows appear for a reason. They seem to respond to people who come to the Cape with questions or concerns. Old tales say a shadow can show the way, not with words or gestures, but by its position. If the figure retreats, the path is dangerous. If it approaches, it means it's safe to continue. These stories are difficult to verify, but they have been repeated for centuries. Standing on the edge of Matapan and watching the shadows moving across the rocks without a visible source, a strange feeling arises within. It's not fear. Rather, it's a sense that the place preserves the memory of a time when the boundaries between worlds were thin and a shadow was considered not just an absence of light, but a part of the soul. Matapan remains one of those corners of Greece where silence speaks louder than any sound. And shadows remind you that the past still moves nearby, even if you can't see the one casting them. Voices of Meteora. In Thessaly, where cliffs rise vertically like the frozen waves of an ancient sea, stand the monasteries of Meteora. They hang over precipices so boldly that it seems any gust of wind could tear them down. But even this architectural audacity doesn't make Meteora the most mysterious place in the region. The main secret lies in the sounds heard here for centuries. They are called the Voices of Meteora, quiet, soft, and in no way connected to human presence. You may have heard that Meteora is famous for its unique acoustics. Everything sounds different here, the wind, footsteps, even your own breathing. But among these sounds, there sometimes emerges something that people describe as a melodic whisper. It's unlike a typical echo. It seems to move through the air, skirting ledges and climbing up the stone towers. This whisper is most often heard in places rarely visited by tourists, in narrow crevices where the shadows linger longer than on the open slopes. When you stand in such a place, the silence seems absolute, but after a few seconds, a soft sound appears. It neither approaches nor recedes. It seems to swirl around. Some compare it to breathing, others to rhythmic singing, repeating the same indistinct note. It feels like a voice, but it's so far removed from normal speech that the brain doesn't try to decipher it. It simply accepts it as a fact. There is a sound here, separate from the human world. Interestingly, this whisper only occurs under certain conditions. The wind must be barely noticeable, the sun low and the air dense, saturated with mountain freshness. At such moments, the rocks begin to act as giant resonators. They reflect the sound so subtly that it seems to transform into a living being. But even knowing these characteristics, the question remains: why does the sound sound so much like a voice? And why does it sometimes seem directed, as if addressed to you? There's a story told by a monk who lived in one of the monasteries many decades ago. He claimed to sometimes hear voices at night. They were quiet, as if they were talking to each other. But when he tried to make out the words, the whispers disappeared, leaving complete silence. He said he felt a slight pressure in his chest at that moment, as if the air around him were growing denser. He added one confession to his notes: "I don't know who's speaking, but I know it's not the wind." There's another peculiarity. Some voices seem polyphonic, as if coming from several sources at once. They may be higher or lower, but they are always soft. Such sounds most often appear in crevices between the highest cliffs. Researchers suggest that Meteora's complex shape creates unique acoustic tunnels where the sound can be reflected multiple times. But this explanation doesn't explain why the sound sometimes appears without visible wind or a source that could produce it. Travelers of the past wrote of Meteora as a place where stones speak. One wandering writer described hearing sounds like drawn-out groans in a certain valley. But these groans didn't express pain or fear. They sounded like an ancient melody, in which each rocky outcrop played its own note. He even claimed the sound repeated itself at regular intervals, as if someone were performing a ritual chant. But when he tried to locate the source, it vanished. The so-called second voice is considered particularly frightening. It's a sound that appears after the main whisper, like a response. People who have heard it say it's lower, slower, as if coming from deep within the rock. It sounds like a distant echo, yet doesn't match the first sound. It's as if someone invisible is joining in the conversation. Such cases are rare, but each time observers describe the same sensation, a sense of presence, soft yet distinct. There are also physical oddities. Sometimes, in certain places, the ground vibrates, barely noticeable, but enough to be felt beneath one's feet. This could be the result of air movement between narrow crevices. But when the vibration coincides with the whisper, it seems as if the sound and movement are connected, as if the rock is actually responding to the sound from within. Another intriguing element is voice reflection. If you speak a word at certain points on Meteora, it returns distorted, softer, as if it had passed through a thick layer of water. Sometimes the word returns with a different rhythm, as if the sound wave had split in two and reflected off different parts of the rock. This creates the effect of a second participant in the conversation, exactly like the answers the monks described. People who have lived in Meteora for long periods say that voices appear more often during moments of strong emotion. If a person comes here anxious, the whispers become louder. If calm, they become softer. It seems as if the space responds to the person's state. Perhaps this is a coincidence. Or perhaps Meteora truly functions as a natural instrument that resonates not only with sound, but also with the energy of those who come here. When you stand atop one of the cliffs and look down, the rocks seem like giant organ pipes reaching deep into the earth. And when a quiet voice begins to sound somewhere below, a strange sense of calm fills you. The voice isn't frightening. It reminds you that you're standing in a place where time flows differently, where the stones remember every whisper, every prayer, every breath left by people over the centuries. The voices of Meteora remain a mystery. Perhaps it's natural acoustics. Perhaps it's the memory of the stone. Or perhaps it's something the ancients understood better than we do. But when you hear this whisper, you understand one thing. Here, sound is more than just sound. It's the breath of a place that remembers more than it can tell. Acropolis Chambers, high above Athens, where sunlight reflects off the white marble so brightly that the stones themselves seem to glow, stands the Acropolis. Everyone knows it, but few realize that beneath the surface, beneath the temples and columns, lies a network of hidden chambers. These chambers are not included in tourist itineraries, and many are not even mentioned in official guidebooks. But it is there that one of Greece's most silent and persistent mysteries resides. Standing before the Parthenon, it's hard to imagine that beneath your feet lies an entire system. Corridors, small halls, narrow passages leading to depths where not even the faintest ray of light penetrates. Some of these chambers have long been explored, but others are sealed with bars or sealed with stone, and it is precisely their origin that raises questions that have no simple answer. The first thing that surprises researchers is the presence of rooms unrelated to water supply, storage, or known rituals. Some chambers show no signs of use. The stones are too smooth, the walls too flat, as if they were created not for human use, but to conceal emptiness. These rooms evoke a strange sensation, as if one is inside a space that lacks its own meaning. One legend says these chambers were created to guard sacred objects so valuable or dangerous that only a select few knew about them. Another says the chambers served as places for secret meetings where decisions were made that were not intended for the common people to hear. But even assuming this, the question remains: why are some chambers located so deep that access to them is only possible through narrow, inconvenient shafts? In some places, the walls are composed of a stone different from the marble used on the surface. This stone is darker, denser, and bears no traces of workmanship typical of Athenian craftsmen. It appears as if the stone was installed prefabricated, simply incorporated into the structure. If this is true, a new mystery arises. Where did this stone come from, and why was it needed here? There are chambers in which sound seems to behave abnormally. If you speak a word softly, the sound returns too loudly. If you speak loudly, the opposite occurs. It's as if the space acts as a filter, letting some frequencies through and absorbing others. Some believe such chambers may have been used in voice rituals or for assessing truth in legal proceedings. After all, it's well known that the Athenians believed in the power of words. But even if so, why are the chambers so deep? Particularly intriguing is a small room that researchers call the circular chamber. It's a hall with near-perfect acoustics hidden beneath one of the southern sections of the Acropolis. Its ceiling is low, its walls are smooth, and its shape resembles a truncated dome. When speaking in the center, the sound returns as a steady vibration. If you move slightly, the vibration disappears. It's as if the space is tuned to a single, specific point. In ancient cultures, such effects were sometimes used for meditation, but here, in the political heart of Athens, it sounds especially strange. Some chambers appear unfinished. Their walls are rough, the surface uneven, and the floors show protrusions, as if the builders stopped abruptly. This has led to the theory that work was halted due to the threat of collapse. But a closer look at the structure reveals that these chambers are sturdier than many of those above. It feels as if someone deliberately halted construction, leaving traces of the process, like a message. We started, but we're not finished. The most disturbing part are the stone niches found in some rooms. They are too small to hold vessels, too numerous to be decorative. Imagine a wall strewn with tiny cell-like recesses. Some are cut at uniform angles, others are randomly placed. It seems they were intended for objects too small and too uniform to be part of everyday life. There are several testimonies from architects working on restoration projects who speak of a strange phenomenon. When they spent long periods in certain chambers, they experienced the sensation of someone standing behind them. It wasn't fear or anxiety, rather it was a feeling that the space remembered the presence of people and responded to it. Perhaps this was simply a phenomenon of confined spaces. But such feelings were described by people who had worked in dozens of underground structures and were able to distinguish real sensations from imagination. Some chambers of the Acropolis appear to predate the complex itself. Their walls are uneven, and the stone appears older and darker, as if it had been preserved underground for millennia before the temples rose above. If this is true, then the Acropolis truly stands on a site that was sacred long before the rise of Athens. These chambers, then, are not part of the Acropolis complex, but its predecessors, echoes of an older culture. Standing inside such a chamber, you feel a silence that presses on your ears. The space seems filled with something invisible. The air is thick, as if it were older than anywhere else. And it's in moments like these that it becomes clear why the Acropolis is not only temples, but also depth. Depth in both the literal and figurative sense. The darkness of the underground halls reminds you that every peak rests on its foundation. And sometimes, the most interesting things are hidden precisely where there's the least light. The Acropolis chambers remain one of Greece's most untold mysteries. Perhaps they are connected to rituals we don't understand. Perhaps they are connected to secret gatherings or sacred sites. Or perhaps they are the remains of an even more ancient civilization whose voices have long since disappeared, but whose presence can still be felt beneath the layers of stone. And while the chambers remain sealed or barely accessible, they continue to hold their secrets, quietly, profoundly, and persistently. Greece is more than just a land of gods and legends. Hidden beneath its mountains, temples, and seas are traces of forgotten worlds whose secrets continue to resonate through the centuries. We walked paths where the whispers of stone are louder than words, where shadows, sounds, and light behave differently. These mysteries remind us that the past is much deeper and stranger than it seems. And each new discovery has the potential to change our understanding of the world.